You are listening to a TechSide Network podcast, TechSide.net, casual conversation from technically passionate people.
This is Americanitis, episode 9 for February 29th. I'm your host, Daniel Sagner. This podcast contains harsh language and covers adult topics. You'll be challenged by views with which you do not agree. We may not be politically correct, but we are correct about politics. This one's going to be a little different, boys and girls. The first half is a bit of listener feedback. Someone asked how I come up with topics. I'd like to explore one of the ways I decide what to discuss. The second part is a breakdown and explanation of the cardinal value of reason. This part is a bit more technical than usual, so bear with me. I hope you enjoy both. I struggled for a week trying to think about what I could possibly add to the discussion around the Democratic primaries. If you're following the right people, everything has been said, and I would just be repeating those points. I started thinking instead about what people aren't saying. This is a useful tool, as you will sometimes find vacuums to fill or exploit. So let's follow along. What's in the air right now? People are talking about how socialism and other forms of collectivism are inherently bad. All right, that's a negative. That's what we shouldn't have. Do we see the positive argument being made? Yes, the argument that free markets are superior is being made. How are they being made? Here we may have a lead. Some argue on practical grounds. Fair enough. Fewer people are making the important moral argument for capitalism. They are making the argument that capitalism is moral because it respects the rights of the individual. This is true enough, but maybe we can go deeper. Find our niche, our hidden purpose. You have rights, yes. I have done casts on why you have rights recently, and I don't want to revisit that quite yet. So where can we go from here? What is underneath rights? The individual, man, qua man, his requirements for living. We can talk ethics until we're blue in the face, but it's important that you have a base underneath your ethics, a place of firmness upon which you can stand and point at reality and say, this is right because. There it is. That's what people aren't saying right now. That's my vein of gold, and boy, is it rich. So let's do it. Let's shake off all the negativity and doomsaying and talk about real positive values for a bit. If you felt lost in the roiling political seas of demagoguery and despair, consider this your lighthouse. The ethics and politics of objectivism tend to be well understood by its adherents at an emotional level. Given enough time reading and integrating, we can get righteously outraged at injustices and feel uplifted by the good in the world. We can see evil for the naked, parasitical nothing that it must be, and we can applaud the victories of others without reservation. Too often, however, we objectivists tend to focus outwardly. We see the ever-looming threat of collectivism in all of its twisted forms, and we are rightly alarmed. It is this alarm, I posit, that distracts us from our philosophy's goal, the betterment of the self, a better understanding of how man is meant to act in this world and why, a discovery of happiness. It is my goal in these podcasts to act as a homing beacon, to remind you that you must come first, that you are the only thing with which ethics is concerned. Your life must be the standard, and you should only focus outwardly as it benefits you. Do not make other people or things the primary focus, but yourself. Philosophy is the instruction book that did not come with your life. This is the first in a series of casts on the 3 cardinal values, reason, purpose, and self-esteem, and the 7 virtues, honesty, integrity, independence, justice, pride, productivity, and rationality. Throughout this series, I will be quoting extensively from Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff. When I say quote, you can assume it's attributed to them. Before we get into the main topic, I would like to point out that each of these items, the values and the virtues, refer to things that only an individual man can claim. There is no such thing as a group self-esteem or a collective independence. Saying these words together just cancels them out. The philosophy is entirely based on rational self-interest. Quote, "To live, man must hold three things as the supreme and ruling values of his life: reason, purpose, self-esteem. Reason as his only tool of knowledge, purpose as his choice of the happiness which that tool must proceed to achieve, self-esteem as his inviolate certainty that his mind is competent to think, and his person is worthy of happiness, which means is worthy of living." Unquote. Today, we will focus on the value of reason. What is reason? Quote, "Reason is the faculty that identifies and integrates the material provided by man's senses." In objectivist epistemology, following reason is the path to knowledge. The very base, the starting point for any act of reasoning, starts with sensory perception. We take in information with our eyes, ears, nose, and so on. The senses are necessarily valid, but that's a topic for another cast, so just stick with me here. From sensation, we move on to percepts, which form into concepts. I'm skipping a little bit of explanation on percepts to keep this within the scope of reason. This is what separates us from the beasts. We form concepts as a method of unit economy. We take in many things with our senses, then we categorize them based on their essential attributes, and then we remove all the measurements. This allows us to read the word table and understand what the writer is talking about without having to be presented with the actual table of which he speaks. I'll be doing a cast on epistemology in general, and concept formation specifically in the future. Now that we have our input as sensations and our form as concepts, we can use the method of reason, logic. Quote, "Logic is man's method of reaching conclusions objectively by deriving them without contradiction from the facts of reality." Unquote. Logic is, quote, "the art of non-contradictory identification." Unquote. By this method, we can see that reason is to take in sense data, form concepts, then derive information about the world. Why is this a value? Reason is a cardinal value because it is the only way to gain knowledge. Man needs knowledge in order to survive. Man cannot live as the animals do by instinct, nor as bacteria and plants do by direct sensory awareness. More is required of the rational animal. Reason is what allows us to flip survival on its head. All creatures survive or die depending on their fitness with the environment around them. This is not so for man, who reshapes nature to suit him. This does not solve all of his problems, but it does introduce new ones. The question for man is not how does one act, but how ought one act. Man produces in order to survive, as, quote, "production is reason applied to the problem of survival." Unquote. What happens if we ignore this value? As with all things, man can choose to evade his reason. Man is a creature of volition. He needs to choose what to value and how to attain it. He needs to put forth the effort necessary to gain and keep that value, and it's a constant process. What if he didn't? What if one decided to not value reason, not pursue it? What does that look like, and what is the result? Quote, "Reason is man's only means of grasping reality and of acquiring knowledge, and, therefore, the rejection of reason means that men should act regardless of and or in contradiction to the facts of reality." Unquote. This is the skeptic's position that says we cannot know anything. Man is impotent in his quest for knowledge. Either your senses cannot be trusted, or They are right, but the human brain is not equipped for reality and distorts your inputs. You hear sayings like, "Who can say?" and "Who am I to know?" or "Who am I to judge?" which Ayn Rand points out really means, "Who am I to think?" In a similar vein, but now dealing with the method, quote, "If men reject logic, then the tie between their mental processes and reality is severed. All cognitive standards are repudiated, and anything goes. Any contradiction on any subject may be endorsed and simultaneously rejected by anyone, as and when he feels like it." Unquote. Here we see the seeds for the mystics. Knowledge isn't possible through reason, they say, but we have something better. Intuition, emotion, scripture, gut feelings, tradition, etc. This group at least realizes that man requires knowledge to survive, but they are rejecting man's only source of knowledge and replacing it with a process that allows for anything to be true. Using reason, I can know that I should not toss a heavy book on the table while my child is asleep. I took in the sensory data regarding books and tables and gravity and noise and babies. I formed concepts of each of these, updating them as more information became available. I can use logic to determine that if I throw this book on the table, it will make a loud noise and probably wake the baby in the next room. But without logic, well, the book might turn into birds and fly away. Maybe the baby won't hear it because I will it to be so. Maybe the table is made out of mayonnaise. Anything is possible. To paraphrase Rand, we can evade reality, but we cannot evade the consequences of evading reality. If you would like me to cover a specific topic, or if you have feedback, I can be reached on Twitter at @AmericanitisTech, that's the @ American, ITISTEK, or at AmericanitisTechSide.net. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, and take the time to leave us a review and comment. We have a Patreon page which enables you to support the podcast for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/TechSide. Show notes are available at TechSide.net/Americanitis. We thank you all for listening. Later days.